Beyond the Books, The Language of Success, The Political Divide on Education. Today's podcast is based upon information contained in the Pew Research Center survey of 2022. Are K through 12 public schools having a positive effect on the country? Democratic and those that lean Democratic, 72% say yes. Among Republicans and those that lean Republican, 61% say no. What is your view of the U.S. Department of Education? Among Democrats and those leaning Democratic, 62% were favorable. Among Republicans and those GOP leaning, 65% were non-favorable. Democrats were most concerned about school shootings, whereas Republicans were most concerned about trans participation in sports, how race relations were taught. The Department of Education was the least liked of 15 federal departments. As an amplification to the view of the U.S. Department of Education, during the 2023 school year, 327 school shootings resulted in 81 deaths and 269 injuries. Among trans athletes, there were less than 100 in high school and less than 100 in college. That is less than 200 participating in sports in high school plus college, and 350 people dead or injured. I think it is perhaps time to reconsider our priorities. Are you confident K through 12 principals are acting in the best interest of the public? Of those Democrats and those leaning Democratic, 76% had a great deal of confidence or a fair confidence in principals, while 24% said not so much or no confidence in principals. Among Republicans, or those leaning Republican, 52% had a great deal or fair confidence, while 47% said not much or no confidence. For the last 4 out of 5 years, this gap has exceeded 30 points. How much influence should governments, school boards, and others have on K through 12 schools teach? Democrats and those leaning Democratic, 20% felt influence was appropriate. 28% felt the state had too much influence, and 17% thought the school board had too much influence. Among Republicans, 52% thought too much influence from the feds, 41% from the state, and 30% from the school board. With regard to parental and teachers' input, Democrats and those leaning Democratic, 23% felt parents had too little input, and 35% felt teachers had too little input. Among Republicans and those leaning Republican, 40% felt parents had too little input, and 24% felt teachers had too little input. Should slavery be taught, showing its effects on Blacks today, or taught, but believing that there is no effect on Blacks today? Of Democrats and those leaning Democratic, 70% thought it should be taught, showing effects today. 30% believed it should be taught, but there were no effects today. Among Republicans, 24% thought it should be taught with any effects showing today. 65% thought it should be taught, but there were no effects today. Should gender identity, sex education, and respect for America's position be taught in the school? 28% of Democrats and those leaning Democratic thought gender identity should not be taught. 46% of Republicans thought gender and identity should not be taught. Republicans held a lower opinion of sex education and respect of America within the world being taught in schools than Democrats. Do teachers' unions positively affect schools? Of Democrats, 60% thought unions were good, while 17% thought they were not. Among Republicans, 20% thought unions were positive, and 53% thought they were not. Should there be prayer in school? Among Democrats and those leaning Democratic, 63% felt there should be no prayer in school. Among Republicans, 60% felt there should be Christian prayer in school. School mission statements mentioned diversity, equity, or inclusion. Democratic states were twice as likely to include that language than Republicans. However, both were similar on mentioning students' readiness, parent and community involvement, and providing a safe and healthy environment. Beyond the Books, The Language of Success, https://susanstotterl.net/podcast or https://youtube/channel/@writer_Susan Stotterl on the second and fourth Tuesday of each month.